I went to a concert last week, went and saw a band, and one of their songs, first line of the song was, "The optimist swears that hope dies last." Well, even the most optimistic among us, I would say, would probably agree that hope dies last, or at least in this case, hope died on Saturday with Pitt's loss at Notre Dame. I don't feel like we need to do much in terms of recounting that game, although we will. I don't know if we need to do much in terms of recounting and recapping this season to this point. We're going to spend a lot of time over the next days, weeks, months talking about where this 2024-25 season went wrong for Pitt, talking about where this team should have been and why they fell short of that goal, why they weren't as good as they should have been, and why they were ultimately, what probably sums up this season best, a disappointment. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think there's a lot of things that can be changed. And, if we didn't talk about Saturday's game, if we didn't talk about, the season leading up to this point and everything, I mean, we wouldn't have anything else to talk about. And certainly this week we're going to talk basketball. We'll mix in football conversation as well. We'll break down tomorrow night's game against Georgia Tech, and on Wednesday we'll talk about that game after the fact, and we'll probably get some football talk on Thursday. I think we'll find some hoops to talk tomorrow, but it's fading. It's fading. The interest in continuing to discuss this, and look, there's plenty of posts on the message boards right now of it's not even worth talking about Pitt basketball right now, but there's still a lot of people that have a lot of things to say about Pitt basketball. We did sort of an impromptu emergency short notice post-game show on Saturday after the Notre Dame game. We did it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, in case you missed that, the way to make sure you don't miss a live stream like that is that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on your notifications. And that way you get an alert sent to your phone. It's like, hey, Pitt, Panther-Lair is doing is live right now, so you better tune in, and that way you wouldn't have missed it. But we had a good crowd, a lot of comments, a lot of questions, a lot of anger, a lot of vitriol for sure. But a lot of people had a lot of things to say, because even though it's a disappointment, and even though it's all gone wrong, and even though it is about as bad as it can get. No, I shouldn't say it's as bad as it can get. It's a major disappointment. It's not as bad as it can get. I mean, we've seen 0-18. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen worse than this. This season is not the worst Pitt basketball season we've seen. It's one of the most disappointing Pitt basketball seasons that we've seen. And that's probably, again, that's the word that we're going to come back to over and over again, is disappointment. And I've said a number of times, I said it on Saturday in the postgame show, I've said it a bunch of times on these morning pits, that I don't think we overestimated this team's talent. There are different questions we could raise about maybe how the fit or the chemistry or how this group of players was going to work together. But on the whole, they should be better than 16-11. They should be better than firmly on the wrong side of the bubble, in the final week of February. They should be better than 7-9 in the ACC. They should be better than all of this. And yet they're not. And, you are what your record says, particularly after 27 games. There's not a lot of mystery or wiggle room in there. You are who they say you are. And now, hope has died last. Barring a miracle run through the ACC tournament, which is not unprecedented. We've seen teams do it as recently as last year. Inferior teams that had a mediocre regular season get hot in the ACC tournament and roll through it and work their way into the NCAA tournament and make the Final Four and all these exciting things. So that path is still out there. And I suppose for the eternal optimists among us, hope has not entirely died, but it is the last thing to go. And probably the biggest thing Pitt is going to deal with in terms of adversity over the next 4 weeks, 3 weeks, or however long it'll be till the end of the ACC tournament is apathy. Because once the hope is gone, you're just left with a bunch of people who don't care. And it's unfortunate, but that's sort of the position this team has put its fans in. Now, they very well can and should come out and beat Georgia Tech tomorrow night. They very well can and should come out and play well tomorrow night. But it's going to be pretty damn hard to walk out of the building tomorrow night and not think to yourself, gee, why didn't you do that on Saturday? Gee, why didn't you do that against Virginia? Gee, why didn't you do that against Louisville? Gee, why didn't you do that at Florida State? Gee, why didn't you do that against Clemson? Missed opportunity after missed opportunity after missed opportunity after missed opportunity. And there are some seasons like last year where we can count on one hand the number of missed opportunities. And then there's seasons like this year where we will count it on two hands. And that's what makes it such a disappointment. And in a way, like, sure, if they win tomorrow night, people will walk out of the building feeling better than they would if they had lost. But it's going to always, those silver linings are going to have a touch of gray because you'll constantly be thinking like, wow, you played great tonight. Why the heck couldn't you do that in South Bend? Why the heck couldn't you do that against Virginia? And keep yourself in position on the right side of the bubble. But this is where they put themselves. This is the position they're in now. And they have to be aware of it as well. Like the players, the coaches have to know that they have effectively played themselves out of the NCAA tournament. That they were living on a thin line after losing to Virginia. But there was still this slim chance that if they could manage to win out in the regular season, they might get right on the right side of the bubble. And then they go to Notre Dame and they score 30 points in the first half. And they can't stop Notre Dame in the second half. Notre Dame scores 46. A team missing its best player and best shooter. And you let him shoot like 45% from three and you give up 46 points in the second half. Your defense is that sorry that you give up 46 to Notre Dame while turning the ball over a ton in the first half. Like, if you want to play bad defense, all right, fine. Go play bad defense. You don't want to rebound well, okay, fine. Go be bad at rebounding. But at least you can be clean on offense. At least you can score. At least you can not turn the ball over. Because, Pitt didn't need to really, if they just don't turn the ball over as much as they did in the first, 6 minutes or 8 minutes or however much it was in the first half on Saturday, they probably win because they're probably up 8 or 10 or 12 at halftime. Because Notre Dame only scored 30 in the first half as well. Because Notre Dame was turning the ball over like crazy. So if Pitt just plays like a clean game, they don't need to play a perfect game. They didn't need to play a complete game. They could still be lousy on defense and they could still get out rebounded. But if they just don't turn the ball over a million times in the first half, they'll probably win that game. But that's this Pitt team. Not only are they inconsistent and incapable of putting together a complete game, they can't even capitalize on other teams' shortcomings. Not consistently enough. They've done it at times. They were able to beat Miami that way. They were able to beat Syracuse that way, even though they fell behind by 16 in the first half. And you know what? Like that's, the Notre Dame game, I think they were only down 4 in the first half. That was like their lowest first half deficit in an ACC game this season. But the fact that there's nothing heroic about the fact that they came back from down 16 against Syracuse. I walked out of that game with the same feeling that I had after the first Syracuse game of doesn't really inspire a whole lot of confidence. Sure, it's great that you built that, you went on that comeback. Hooray. Why the heck did you fall down by 16 in the first place? Too inconsistent, too many holes, too much of a disappointment. And the question of why this team is such a disappointment, why they've fallen so short of expectations, is going to be a question that will dog them throughout the rest of the regular season, through the ACC tournament, and through the entire offseason. And Jeff Capel will have to answer that question. If the players will have to answer that question. And really, Capel has to answer that question, not when I ask it, or Chris Carter, or Stephen Thompson, or Jim Hammond, or any of the other, Jerry DePaula, not when any of us asks it. It doesn't matter what we ask. He's got to answer that question for himself. And it's one of many. And that's the umbrella question of why did this team fall so short? Why was this team such a disappointment? And underneath that question, there's a bunch of other questions, but they're all they all filter into that one big question. Why did this team fall so short of expectations? Why was this season a major disappointment? Maybe the most disappointing season of Capel's time at Pitt. When you compare what the expectations were and where you thought this team was going to be and how you thought they were going to do with the players they have, disappointing. All right, let's get into some finer details about this team. I'm actually going to build off a post I put on the message board yesterday of, what are 3 changes you can make. And I think there's a few things that stand out about why this team has struggled as mightily as they have. And I'll present them in no specific order, but it's a few topics to discuss as we jump into the conversation here to start the week. I know you might not want to start your week talking about Pitt basketball because you probably don't feel great about it after what went down over the weekend. But let's do it. Let's talk a little bit Pitt hoops, here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, yeah, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our Pitt video content. Monday through Friday, we've got these Morning Pitt videos. We have our weekly live show at Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. We'll be back on Wednesday night at 8:30 this week instead of that Thursday morning show we did last week, which was fun. But we'll get back into our regular weekly evening show time. We've got our, we do some post-game shows like we did after the Notre Dame game on Saturday. Maybe we'll do one after the Louisville game this Saturday. What time is that? That's a 6 o'clock game. Yeah, maybe. Maybe we'll do an evening post-game show after the Louisville game on Saturday. But, we got a lot. Press conferences, post-game shows, interviews, all those kinds of things, plus these Morning Pitt episodes and our live shows right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. And then don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. We cover it all. You might not like what's going, what happened with the football team in the final 6 games of the season. You might not like what's going on in the basketball program right now. But we're still covering it for you. We're still giving you a lot of great information, a lot of breakdowns and analysis. We'll have a film breakdown of the Notre Dame game later today. We always add a lot of analysis and content related to the football team. You might not like it, but at least you can read about it and talk about it. That's what we give you an opportunity to do at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So a few things, and I brought this up on the message board yesterday. I sort of said, what things would you change? You know what I mean? Personnel-wise, usage-wise, not like who's the player from the past you would add to this team, because the answer to that is always DeJuan Blair. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's always DeJuan Blair. It's more about, what went wrong with this team? What were the biggest issues with this team that needed to be fixed, needed to be corrected, and never really were addressed. And I think one of the first things that people always bring up is the center position. That Cam Corhen has not been what Pitt needed him to be. And we've had a lot of conversations about this. On the Morning Pitt, we've talked about it on the live shows. We've talked a lot about Cam Corhen, his contributions, what he was expected to do, and what he has actually ended up doing. And I think the general consensus that a lot of people have come to is that he's not what Pitt needs. He's not the kind of center that Pitt needs. For a team that's as guard-driven as Pitt is, where the guards are taking all the shots and they're really the engines of the offense, what you need out of a center is not that guy who's going to score, because you feed the ball down low, and finish dunks and stuff like that, which I think is what the desire was coming out of last season when Federico couldn't collect a basketball that touched his hands. You know what I mean? There was a feeling like, you got to get a center who can score. And if you get a center who can score to go along with these guards, holy cow, they're going to be so good. Well, they got a center who is not a bad scorer. He had, he had a 20-point game at Notre Dame. Incidentally, I think the top 5 highest scoring games of Cam Corhen's career, his teams are 2-3. And the 2 times in his career that he scored 20 points or more, his teams have lost. But I digress. I think it's become pretty clear that what this team needs is, the primary thing you need from a center with this team, the way it's built, is a center who can grab offensive rebounds and score putbacks, score second chance points. That's the biggest thing you need from a center. Not a guy that you can feed down low, because they just don't do it, and he hasn't been good enough at doing it. Unless you have Zach Edey, you don't need to try and play like you have Zach Edey. So you need a center who maybe he can shoot threes, but mostly you need offensive rebounds and putbacks. You need defense. I think an offensive rebounding defensive center would be ideal for Pitt with the way they're currently constructed. The thing is, and look, I've been advocating for a near even split of minutes at the center position between Cam Corhen and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I joined that bandwagon a while ago. I was certainly not the first on it. And as I'm often reminded, I was a little bit slow to get on that bandwagon, but that's fine. I'm there. I think there should be a split between Guillermo and Cam Corhen. But I just don't know. If those are the main things you need from the center, is offensive rebounding and defensive post presence, I don't think you're going to get it all that much from Guillermo. He might be a little bit better. It seems like analytically he's better as a maybe a better rebounder, maybe a better defensive player, probably a better defensive player. Analytically, like the eye test, he just looks, if he's better at all, he's only by a little bit. Because he still gets pushed around. He still doesn't really rebound all that well. He still, gets kind of owned under the basket. But I mean, fine. I just don't feel like there's a whole lot you could do in that situation because this is the personnel that you have. A bigger issue, I think, and this isn't necessarily the reason they lost to Virginia or the reason they lost on Saturday or they lost Clemson or Louisville or anything like that, but it is an issue that I think does have some ramifications, some repercussions for the rest of the team, is an inability and maybe a downright failure to develop the bench. And I looked at some of the minutes yesterday, and Brandon Cummings, his minutes went up during the 7 games when Damian Dunn was out, but he was still only averaging about 19 minutes per game in those situations. Some of those were like Sam Houston in Eastern Kentucky, although, he had the 30-point game in there. But then once Dunn returned, Cummings' minutes took a tailspin, and he was back down to basically single digits. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem. I think even when Damian Dunn was out there at the beginning of the season, Brandon Cummings should have been getting consistent minutes. When Dunn went out, Cummings should have been getting more than 19 minutes per game because you didn't know how long Dunn was going to be out. And it was just a perfect opportunity to get this freshman on the court, get him more experience, get him comfortable in the game, and get him better prepared. Coaches always say that by the time you get to January, if you have freshmen who've been playing a lot, they're not freshmen anymore. They're more like sophomores because they've got all that experience. Well, Brandon Cummings didn't have that. He wasn't a sophomore in January. He was still a freshman because he wasn't getting a lot of playing time. And the same thing for Amsal Delilich. And like this is like setting aside my like unhealthy obsession with this guy. Like, why did he not play more? Like, there's no good reason or justification for why he did not play more over the course of the non-conference schedule. I know he was hurt, but once he got back, he should have been on the court fairly regularly. You didn't need, when Damian Dunn was out, you didn't need to still get Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett into the mid to high 30s every night in minutes. Minutes could have gone to Cummings. Minutes could have gone to Delilich. To get those guys on the court, get them more involved, get them more comfortable, get them more experienced. Not because you necessarily needed them to beat whoever, VMI or Sam Houston or something like that, but the more time you got them on the court in December, the better prepared they were going to be to play and help you in January. Instead, you go to a game on February 22nd with 5 games left to play, so like your game number 26 of the season, and your bench totals 13 minutes. Notre Dame's bench scored 15 points. Pitt's bench played 13 minutes. 10 for Cummings, 3 for Delilich. Now, I don't know if that's the reason Pitt struggled. Pitt, I think once you got past the turnovers in the first half, the biggest issue for Pitt against Notre Dame on Saturday was their defense. And I don't know if Brandon Cummings and Amsal Delilich are going to help them all that much defensively. Certainly not in their current state. Maybe if you'd gotten them a lot of extra playing time in December, they'd be better, accustomed, and then more in January, they'd be better defensively out there. I don't know. So I don't know if that changes the outcome of the game. But the guys you had on the court didn't win. And you've done nothing to develop the guys behind them. Cummings, Delilich, Jorge Diaz-Graham, Papa Amadou Kanté, but particularly the wings of Cummings, Delilich, and Jorge, you've given them no opportunity to improve, no opportunity to develop. And Jeff Capel was asked after the game, why didn't you use your bench more? He says, well, Brandon Cummings had 3 fouls, and Amsal didn't play well. He played 3 minutes. He got beat on a drive. But if you're going to bench everybody who got beat on a drive, you're going to have to pull an old, my team is on the court. And I think you only have 1 or 2 guys left. Never developed the bench. And hey, like I always say, it's hard for me to question personnel decisions because I'm not in practice. I don't watch the film with the coaches. I don't know what these guys are supposed to be doing. So I don't know who's doing the right thing, who's doing the wrong thing. Like, they have a lot more information upon which to make their decisions. All right. And so maybe they're making the decisions that give the team the best chance to win by keeping all these guys on the bench and basically just playing 5 guys or 6 when Dunn is out there or when Dunn was out there. Maybe they were making the best decisions for the team, and the guys who were beyond those top 5 or top 6 were just too much of a liability. You just couldn't put them on the court because it would put your team in a vulnerable position. Maybe that was the case. To which I say, well, who assembled the roster in the first place then? Because you either failed at assembling the roster or you failed at developing it throughout the course of the season. I mean, it can be both. You can be both. I don't think it is, though. Well, I think it's one or the other. Although it could be a little bit of both. But, is that the reason this season went the way it did? I don't know. Is the center position the reason the season went the way it did? I don't know. Probably a little bit. The lack of developing the bench, probably a little bit. I think the inability to develop a second ball handler, somebody who could take some of that pressure off of Jalen Lowe, that either he could play off the ball or get some rest from time to time, just to have someone else to handle that role when Damian Dunn wasn't in. I think that would have helped. Whatever's going on with Jalen Lowe this year, whatever his challenges he is facing, having somebody else not to take all the minutes, not to start, not to play 35 minutes and Lowe only plays 17 or something like that. Not like that at all. But just to get a little bit of a different look out there. A little bit of a different lineup out there. A little bit extra rest for Lowe. I don't think that would have been a bad thing, but they never developed a second ball handler. When Damian Dunn was gone, it was Brandon Cummings, but not enough to really get him going out there. And I think that kid is playing his tail off. I think he's working really hard. I think he made the most of the 10 minutes he got on Saturday. And obviously played well against Syracuse and Miami, but he could be further. I think he could be further along with more playing time earlier in the season, but that didn't happen. They never developed the bench, and here they are for a lot of reasons, not just because of the bench, but here they are. I don't know. If you guys have other thoughts or something else to say about this, post it in the comments here on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. We're saying the same things over and over again, and just waiting for the outcomes to change. But like the man says, the optimist, says that hope dies last. Might be at that point. All right. Whatever happens, look, and whether hope has died, whatever, I'm talking about it. I'm not going to get into the poetry anymore. We're still going to keep talking about Pitt basketball. We're going to keep talking about Pitt football. We're going to keep talking about Pitt recruiting when it gets into the off seasons and the transfer portal times for each of those programs. We're going to keep talking about that and everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. So make sure you like this video. You might not like the content or the topic today, but you can at least like the video. And subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hope you had a good weekend outside of the Pitt game. Enjoy your Monday. Hope your week gets off to a great start. I think it's going to be a little warmer this week, so we got that to look forward to. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.